You know when you're watching one of those true crime shows, and the detective has this gut feeling about a suspect?
Yeah, like right off the bat.
Exactly. But then, later, it turns out that snap judgment was, well, completely off base.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe think about, like, the Force in Star Wars, that kind of subtle push.
Right. Well, what if I told you there's something kind of like that, but it's operating inside your own head, nudging your decisions without you even consciously agreeing to it?
And that subtle push, that quiet operator,
Mm.
that's what we're diving into today, unconscious bias. Or you'll also hear it called implicit bias.
Yeah, and we're not talking about the beliefs you tell people you have or the values you write down. This is deeper.
Much deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It's about these hidden associations, often learned from our culture, that just quietly shape how we judge things, who we hire, how we interact every single day.
It's kind of wild because, surveys show that explicit biases, the really overt stuff, have gone down a lot over the decades. People are much less likely to say prejudiced things openly.
Which is good. Absolutely a sign of progress. But here's the paradox our sources really dig into. These implicit biases. They're still there. They persist.
And they help explain why we still see these stubborn inequalities, right? In things like hiring, healthcare, policing, even when organizations say they're committed to fairness.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to pull together what we know from decades of research. We're talking cognitive psychology, neuroscience, even behavioral economics.
We want to unpack the mental machinery behind these biases, how scientists try to measure something invisible, and maybe most importantly, what, if anything, we can actually do about it.
Okay, so to get our heads around this hidden operator, we kind of need to start with the basics of how our minds work. The foundation here is often called dual process theory.
Right, the two systems idea, famously put forward by Daniel Kahneman, right? System 1 and System 2.
Precisely. Think of system 1 as your brain's autopilot, fast, automatic, intuitive. It runs on these mental shortcuts, heuristics.
It's great for, like, recognizing your friend's face instantly or slamming the brakes if a car cuts you off. Super efficient.
Totally efficient. But it trades off careful analysis for speed. It's like a quick first draft.
And System 2?
System 2 is the opposite. It's slow, deliberate, analytical. It takes effort. It's the part of your brain that does long division or, really weighs the pros and cons of a big decision.
Okay, so where does the bias creep in? Is it mostly a System 1 problem?
Primarily, yes. The research is pretty clear that unconscious biases mainly bubble up from System 1 because it's so fast at categorizing things, recognizing patterns.
Which is useful when it's like, tiger, he's danger.
Right. But when that rapid categorization gets applied to social groups, boom, you get these automatic associations, often based on stereotypes floating around in our culture.
So System 1 is just kind of downloading everything. Movies, news headlines, jokes, offhand comments, and building this massive unverified database of stereotypes.
That's a good way to put it. It gets wired in through just repeated exposure, cultural immersion. But here's a key nuance that's emerged in more recent research. Okay? It's not just that System 2 needs to swoop in and, correct System 1 after a bias pops up. Really effective thinking happens when System 1 flags something for System 2. It sends up a flare, basically, saying, hey, slow down. Maybe don't use the shortcut here.
Ah, interesting. So it's about the interaction between the systems, not just System 2 cleaning up System 1's messes.
Exactly. It's about System 1 knowing when to engage the brakes and call in the analyst.
Okay, so if System 1 is this rapid automatic process, where is this happening in the brain? Let's get into the neuroscience a bit.
Yeah, the brain stuff is fascinating. Researchers have pinpointed a few key areas. For a long time, the focus was on the amygdala.
Which is often linked to, fear and threat detection.
Right, and studies showed it lights up differently when people see faces from groups they're unfamiliar with or groups that have negative stereotypes attached. So initially, people thought, aha, the prejudice center.
But it wasn't quite that simple.
No. More recent work suggests the amygdala's role is maybe more about salience, like how much something grabs your attention because it's culturally significant or maybe just unfamiliar, rather than it being inherently about prejudice itself.
Okay, so if the amygdala isn't the main driver, what is? Especially for controlling bias.
Well, that seems to involve the prefrontal cortex more. Think of it as the brain's executive control center. You've got regions like the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC.
The ACC.
Yeah, it seems to act like an alarm bell. It detects conflict, like when your automatic gut-level association clashes with your conscious goals or values, like, oops, that thought doesn't align with my belief in fairness.
And then there's another part that actually does something about the alarm.
Exactly. Regions like the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex or DLPFC. Think of that as a pilot stepping in to exert control, override the automatic impulse, and try to align your behavior with your conscious intentions.
Okay, so we have an alarm and a pilot, but what happens when you're, say, stressed out, tired, or rushed?
Ah, that's critical. The research shows that under cognitive load, stress, fatigue, time pressure, those control mechanisms, the alarm and the pilot, they get weaker. They don't function as well.
And that's when System 1's automatic biases are more likely to just take over your behavior.
Precisely. Your conscious control slips, and the automatic associations have more influence.
Wow. Okay, so if our conscious control isn't always reliable, especially under pressure, how on earth do researchers even measure these hidden biases? That seems tricky.
It is tricky, and it's led to some really important tools, but also some big debates. The most famous measurement tool is probably the implicit association test, the IAT.
Where I've heard of that, developed by Anthony Greenwald and his colleagues.
That's the one. The IAT is clever because it doesn't ask you what you believe. Instead, it measures the strength of associations between concepts in your mind by looking at your reaction time.
How does that work, basically?
Well, it asks you to quickly sort words or images into categories. For example, pairing black faces with good words versus white faces with good words. The idea is if you have a strong implicit association between, say, white and good, you'll be faster at that pairing task.
Faster reaction time means stronger unconscious link.
That's the core assumption.
Yeah.
And the sheer volume of data collected is staggering. Project Implicit, the online platform where people can take these tests,
Yeah.
they've had over 40 million tests completed. It's created this massive data set.
40 million. Okay, so what's the big headline finding from all that data? Give us the wow statistic.
The most consistent and maybe sobering finding relates to race bias. Across all those tests, roughly 75% of participants show an easier time associating white faces with positive concepts and black faces with negative ones. A measurable pro-white anti-black implicit bias.
75%. Wow, that's huge. That suggests this isn't just a few bad apples, it's a widespread cognitive pattern, likely reflecting the cultural environment we're all swimming in.
Exactly. It points to something deeply embedded at a societal level.
But is the IAT perfect? You mentioned debates. Is it really capturing pure personal prejudice?
That's the heart of the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
While the IAT is really good at showing these broad societal level patterns like the 75% figure, its ability to predict individual discriminatory behavior is actually, well, weaker than initially hoped.
Weaker how?
Meta-analyses, studies that combine results from many other studies, show that someone's IAT score often doesn't strongly predict how they'll behave in a specific situation. Critics argue the test might be tapping into your knowledge of cultural stereotypes, what you know society associates with certain groups, rather than your own deep-seated personal prejudice.
So it measures cultural awareness as much as personal bias. That's a really important distinction.
It is. It means the IAT is a powerful tool for understanding societal patterns, but maybe not a perfect diagnostic for individual prejudice or predicting specific actions.
Okay, so setting aside the measurement debates for a second, let's talk about the real-world impact. Where do these implicit shortcuts actually cause harm? Maybe we can run through some common types of bias found in the research.
Absolutely. There are several common ones. First, affinity bias. This is basically liking people who are like you.
The mini-me effect, hiring someone because they went to your college or share your hobbies.
Exactly. Then there's gender bias. These are the unconscious associations about skills or roles based on gender. Think about assumptions affecting who gets hired for tech jobs versus, say, HR roles or differences in pay and promotion.
Okay, what else?
Confirmation bias. This one's huge. It's our tendency to look for and believe information that confirms what we already think and ignore stuff that challenges it.
Like only reading news sources that agree with you.
Precisely. Then, ageism. Making judgments based on age stereotypes, assuming younger workers lack experience or older workers can't learn new tech, for example.
Right, and the last one.
Attribution bias. This is about how we explain behavior. We tend to attribute other people's failures to their character or their group, but our own failures to the situation. Bad luck, tough circumstances.
Oh, yeah. I failed the test because it was unfair, but they failed because they didn't study.
Exactly. And that really messes up fair evaluations.
These all sound problematic, but where do we see the most serious systemic consequences? Our sources mentioned some pretty stark examples.
It did. Healthcare is a major area of concern. Research consistently shows that healthcare providers, just like everyone else, hold implicit biases against various marginalized groups, racial minorities, LGBTQ+ individuals, people with obesity.
And this actually affects care.
Sadly, yes. There are studies, for instance, showing that physicians with higher levels of pro-white implicit bias were less likely to prescribe appropriate pain medication or certain cardiac treatments for Black patients compared to white patients with the exact same symptoms.
Wow, that's literally life and death.
It can be. And you see similar patterns in the criminal justice system. Simulation studies have found that police officers implicitly associate Black individuals with weapons more readily than white individuals.
Leading to faster decisions to shoot in those simulations.
Measurably faster, yes.
Yeah.
Again, even when the objective situation is identical.
And in employment.
Yeah.
Beyond just affinity bias.
Oh, yeah. The classic resume studies are powerful. Researchers send out identical resumes, changing only the name to suggest different ethnicities.
Like a typically white-sounding name versus a typically black-sounding name.
Exactly. And consistently, the white-sounding names get significantly more callbacks for interviews. Same qualifications, different outcomes, just based on an implicit association triggered by a name.
Okay, this is pretty sobering. We see the mechanism, the measurement challenges, the real-world impact. So the big question, can we actually change this? Can we rewire our system, one? Or are we stuck relying on just changing the system around us?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The current thinking, and this is really important, is moving towards treating bias less like a fixed trait or a moral failing, and more like a habit.
A habit? Like biting your nails.
Sort of. A deeply ingrained mental habit. And like any habit, it can potentially be broken or changed, but it takes conscious effort and practice. This comes largely from the work of Patricia Devine and her colleagues.
The prejudice habit-breaking intervention. What did they find?
They found that just knowing about bias, simple awareness, isn't really enough to make a lasting difference. You need tools, strategies, and you need to practice them.
Like cognitive behavioral therapy, but for bias.
That's a great analogy. Devine's intervention involved teaching people 5 specific strategies and having them practice over several weeks, about 12 weeks, I believe.
Okay, what are these 5 strategies? Can we break them down?
Yeah, absolutely. First is stereotype replacement. Basically, recognizing when you have a stereotypical thought or feeling, labeling it, and consciously replacing it with a non-stereotypical response.
Actively challenging the thought in the moment.
Right. Second is counter-stereotypic imaging. This means thinking about or looking at examples of people from the stereotype group who strongly contradict the stereotype, like picturing a female CEO or a Black scientist.
Okay, makes sense. What's next?
Third, individualization. This is about making a conscious effort to see people as individuals rather than just members of a group, focusing on their unique personal qualities and details, getting specific information.
So actively seeking out what makes them them, not just what group they belong to.
Exactly. Fourth is perspective taking, trying to actively imagine and understand the perspective of someone from the stereotype group, stepping into their shoes, so to speak.
Empathy, basically.
A very active form of it, yes. And the fifth strategy is increasing intergroup contact, purposefully seeking out opportunities for positive, cooperative interactions with people from different groups, ideally where everyone has equal status.
So getting to know people who are different from you in a positive context. And Devine found that practicing these 5 things actually worked.
Yes. Her research showed that people who learned and consistently practiced these strategies showed significant reductions in their implicit bias levels. And these changes lasted over time, even weeks later. It suggests that practice is key.
Which really contrasts with a lot of standard diversity training, right? Like the one-off workshops or just getting your IAT results back.
Absolutely. The evidence suggests those kinds of brief interventions, just raising awareness, have very limited long-term effects. The Federal Judicial Center, for example, reviewed implicit bias training and found that any effects often fade within just a few weeks.
Because they teach awareness, but not the habit-breaking practice.
Exactly. You need the ongoing effort to form new mental pathways.
So if individual effort requires such sustained practice, and one-off training isn't very effective, where does that leave us? Does change have to come from somewhere else?
Well, individual effort is still valuable, especially using those sustained practice methods. But many researchers now emphasize that structural or systemic changes are often more powerful and reliable for reducing the impact of bias.
Changing the environment, not just the individual minds within it.
Precisely. Think about things like implementing structured interviews with standardized questions for everyone, or using blind review processes for resumes or grant applications, where identifying information is removed.
So you remove the opportunity for bias to influence the decision, even if the decision maker still holds those implicit associations.
Exactly. Or building in diversity-focused performance metrics for managers. These kinds of structural changes can effectively de-bias the outcome, regardless of the internal state of the individuals involved.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into the hidden world inside our own heads. Let's try and boil it down. What are the key takeaways for you?
Okay, three main things for me. First, remember, unconscious biases aren't about being a bad person. They're these powerful, fast, System 1 shortcuts, largely picked up from our culture. They're a feature of how our brains work, though a problematic one.
Right. Second takeaway for me is about the IAT. It's incredibly valuable for showing us the big picture, those widespread societal patterns that 75% statistic is hard to ignore. But because it also measures cultural knowledge, it's not a perfect predictor of your individual behavior in every situation. Use it as a societal mirror, maybe, not a personal crystal ball.
Well said. And third, lasting change seems to need a two-pronged approach. On one hand, sustained individual effort using habit-breaking strategies like Patricia Devine's 5 practice really matters. But just as importantly, maybe even more so, we need structural changes in our organizations and systems that minimize the opportunity for bias to creep into important decisions.
It's like we need to engineer the environment for fairness, not just hope individuals can overcome their wiring all the time. The focus seems to be shifting towards fixing the context, changing the cultural inputs that feed these biases in the first place.
Exactly. Which leads us to a pretty big closing thought.
Let's hear it.
Well, if we accept that repeated exposure to cultural messages is a major source fueling these unconscious biases, then what specific changes could we realistically make starting today in our media, in our schools, in our workplaces to actually start engineering a more equitable cognitive architecture for the next generation? What would that look like?